I've sat down to write a review of The Long Dark a handful of times now, and each time I start typing it out, I think, I haven't played enough of this game to give it a fair opinion yet. After shelving and coming back to this review like 5 times, I'm confident saying, there is no amount of time playing this game that'll ever be enough. Except for those people who survive 1,000 in-game days. That's enough. See, the premise of The Long Dark is actually quite easy to explain. A geomagnetic storm fries your plane's electronics, at which point you crash on an island in northern Canada.
Aurora Borealis! At this time of year, at this time of day, in this part of the country, localized entirely within your care.
Played?
Yes. That's it?
Yes.
Here, your only objective is to survive, staying fed and hydrated, sleeping, contending with local wildlife, surviving inclement weather. Familiar concepts to anybody who's played a survival game. As someone who actually lives in one of the coldest cities on Earth, this game accurately portrays one of my January grocery trips. So The Long Dark isn't that difficult to explain conceptually or even mechanically, but as you learn to survive for longer periods of time, those mechanics reveal new layers of complexity. They intertwine in ways that make them hard to separate, which in turn makes it kinda hard to talk about them individually. Before even talking about the finer points, I want to ask you a question. What is it about survival stories that we find so appealing? Not just survival, we're doing that right now, it's just easier than it used to be. I'm talking about surviving in a wilderness setting, battling the elements and testing our mettle. As time goes on, genres become more complicated, survival stories are just timeless, enduring. Life is generally comfy now, food and shelter is pretty accessible, so now we have the luxury. If you ask me the appeal, I'd say it's an instinctive urge to reconnect with Mother Nature, working with her and fighting against her. Thanks to the magic of video games, we have the power to simulate these experiences in a way that's tense, fun, engaging, and gives me a greater appreciation for the hell that our forebears went through. Unless you're the descendant of an archduke, don't pretend you know what the rest of us are going through. With that out of the way, allow me to officially introduce the game. The Long Dark is a survival game developed by Hinterland Studios. It's set on the fictional Great Bear Island, which is somewhere, let's go with here. The game has several different modes of play, namely a survival mode and an episodic story mode, and there's also a challenge mode as well. The development history of this game began in 2013 when a team of industry veterans was assembled to launch a Kickstarter campaign. Some of the developers include Ken Ralston, the lead designer of Morrowind, as well as Marianne Krawczyk, who wrote for the God of War series. An early access build was released in 2014, which would have been the last time that I played it. I figured after the better part of a decade, it was time to revisit the game and see how far it's come. I completed the game's story mode, which, full disclosure, isn't finished yet. Cut them a break, it's only been 8 years. This actually puts them ahead of some other Kickstarter games. Before diving into the story mode, I think talking about survival mode will give us a better idea of what the gameplay is like. So you're dropped off somewhere in the Canadian wilderness. Where do you start? Well, man's gotta eat. The game is set in an open world environment broken into various hub areas, within which you'll find ample opportunities to chow down as long as you're capable of hitting a rabbit in the head with a rock. Hey, grog needs start somewhere. Your time will be split between walking the wilds and hunkering down in a cozy shelter, and there's a variety of food choices to match your surroundings. Finding an abandoned settlement is a lucky break. You'll be flush with canned goods and all of the toilet water you can drink. You can also melt snow, but be sure to boil the hell out of it, or at least use some purification tablets, or you might end up with dysentery, otherwise known as gamer's disease. But worry not, nowadays humanity has a secret weapon, penicillin. In fact, there are a variety of diseases and health issues one can contract in the Long Dark, which is why it's smart to raid every medicine cabinet you can find. Painkillers and antibiotics don't weigh much and they could save your life. So finding a town or cabin could lead you to medication and non-perishable foods. Non-perishables are pretty helpful in the Long Dark. They don't go bad for a long time, they have relatively low weight, which means you won't be spraining your ankle every 10 seconds, and they can be reheated at a fire to keep you warm on those cold, lonely nights. Make sure you pack a can opener though, or grog needs smash rock against can open. Carrying a lot of soda pop around might weigh you down a bit though, as funny as it is to drink 12 orange Fagos for dinner with a can of dog food as a nightcap. There are a few problems with non-perishables though. First of all, you won't always be near civilization and cans don't grow on trees. Also, manufactured foods aren't a renewable resource. You can eat an entire town out of house and home, but if you ever need to come back through the area, you'll find a bunch of bare shelves waiting for you. So at some point, you'll want your food to come from a renewable resource. When you first start in survival mode, you'll be scrambling. You'll hoard every scrap of food, every flare, your fingers will bleed with failed attempts to start a fire. But making it past that initial hurdle and finding your footing is where the experience truly begins. The Long Dark is chock full of animals, resources, and tools, the function of which you probably won't even know for some time. A mountaineering rope is like 10 pounds, that's a lot. I don't even know if I'll use it, but what if you need it? A lot of these initially useless items can be used at workbenches to craft gear that can help you hunt, trap, or fish. A snare, for instance, can be used to catch a rabbit. That rabbit can be harvested for fur to make mittens, guts to make snares, and meat. Meat from animals is calorie dense and plentiful, but there are some downsides. First of all, meat and other animal resources take time to harvest. If you spend 2 hours getting material from a deer in a blizzard, you might come out of the other end with hypothermia. Also, animal meats deteriorate quickly. You can slow the rate of spoilage by jamming them in the snow, but it's still not going to be long before they're inedible. If you eat meat or any food with a low condition rating, you risk intestinal parasites, also known as... let's see here, what's a funny Wild West colloquial term for a disease? Grocer's itch. Oh, no wait, that's not right at all. As for guts, hides, and all other non-meat resources, they need to be cured before they can be used. That means air drying them indoors for a period of time and making your cabin look like Patrick Bateman's apartment. Afterwards, they can be used to craft a small variety of useful items. The number of craftable items is actually quite small compared to other games. This is bound to turn some people off. A lot of folks play survival games for this constant, high dopamine feedback loop of gathering and crafting something that makes gathering easier, till you end up in a min-maxy metagame. The Long Dark isn't about that, it's purely about the experience of survival, and the options you're given complement that perfectly. There's enough craftable items to make long-term survival viable, but never enough to make you feel overly comfortable. You can go full Grizzly Adams mode, stitching together clothing made from the hides of animals. It takes time, it's warm and durable, but sooner or later it's going to be in rough condition. Know what you do then? You go hunt more animals, you cure their hides, and you repair it. You're at the mercy of nature. Improving your skills and getting better at the game increases your odds of survival, but it's never guaranteed. That type of stress means nothing is taken for granted. A simple fire is as inviting 100 hours into this game as when you first start. Hunting in the Long Dark is pretty straightforward. Animals spawn somewhat randomly, with likelihoods increasing or decreasing depending on where you are. Except for the town of Milton, which is a permanent furry convention. Seriously, this is the wolf capital of Bear Island. Herbivores like deer and rabbits are skittish. They usually want nothing to do with you. Things get dicey when you encounter predators like a wolf. Gray wolves are common in this game. If approached, they'll become aggressive and stalk you. Thankfully, they're scared of flares and fire, which means if you're well prepared, it's not too hard to spook them. You can also use a gun to shoot them, which will either kill or scare them, but it's not recommended unless you really want their hides. Guns and ammunition aren't terribly rare, but they're rare enough that you should really save your bullets for moments of absolute necessity. Guns deteriorate with repeated use and require cleaning kits to maintain. I really like that the hunting rifle is a Lee Enfield, which was issued to the Canadian military for decades. Assuming this island survives on military surplus, I give 10 points for historical accuracy. So guns or flares will take care of a regular wolf pretty quickly, but what about gigawolves? That's right, in some dangerous areas you'll encounter timber wolves. They travel in large packs and are far more ruthless in stalking you. Mechanically, they differ from standard wolves quite a bit. Timberwolf packs are subject to morale, represented by a meter at the bottom of the screen. Timberwolf morale is slowly broken by the player shooting them, tossing noisemakers, or using the coveted marine flare, which looks quite dazzling at night. Consider that survival mode doesn't allow you to save. If you die, you die. When you hear howling and see that morale meter appear, it is a profoundly panic-inducing situation. There are also moose. These assholes just charge at you if you get too close. It hurts quite a bit, but their comedic timing is outstanding, and their supple skin can be made into a satchel for a few extra pounds of carry weight. A reminder of your victory over Canada's premier lovable beast. And I'm not talking about Anne Murray. Finally, there's bears. They can be problematic. Give them a wide berth and you'll be fine. But during a blizzard, you might wander into a cave seeking shelter. There's a slim chance that this cave is occupied, and if it is, prepare yourself for a violent hug. Bears are pretty tough to take down, usually taking at least a couple of shots. In the meantime, they don't run like wolves. Your fear only makes them stronger. Regardless of how well you contend with nature, sooner or later you'll be caught with your pants down. Animal attacks in the Long Dark are one of my favorite mechanics. Not to experience, necessarily, I'd rather not be mauled, but in the creative way that they're handled. Every time I was attacked by an animal, it caught me off guard. Even when you see an animal coming, that sudden lurch forward followed by the grapple is just alarming. Once you're in this position, you need to quickly select one of several options while you're getting your throat ripped out. These tools all have varying degrees of effectiveness, and the order that they're displayed in changes each time, so you have to think and select very quickly. Oftentimes in my panic, I would pick a suboptimal tool to deal with the situation. From there, you have to rapidly press the action button to get the animal off you, followed by a command if you have a gun. It all takes place over the course of a couple seconds, but it's an intense experience. In the original Metal Gear Solid, there's a section where Snake is tortured. In order to keep his constitution up, you have to very rapidly press the action button.
Don't even think about using auto fire, or I'll know.
At first it's no big deal, but as Snake is repeatedly tortured, your thumb actually becomes incredibly sore. You start using your entire forearm to mash the button, but that gets sore too. By the end of it, it can feel like literal torture to mash that button. I love it when games use hardware to simulate the experience they're portraying.
So, you like Suikoden?
And that's exactly what an animal attack is like in The Long Dark. It's high anxiety. You have to make an important decision in a split second, then deal with the consequences of that decision while you're flailing on the action button. The panic is heightened by the knowledge that there are no save games. If you screw up now, you screw up for good. Usually the result of an animal attack won't be instant death. The winter clothes you painstakingly sewed together over 3 weeks will be shredded. You'll have broken ribs, lacerations that can get infected, sprains, and bruises. You'll hobble through the winter cold, developing hypothermia as you try to find your stash of medical supplies. It's actually far, far crueler than just killing you outright, because it gives you time to ruminate over how much progress you're about to lose. If your condition is low, your character will start losing consciousness. Your vision fades and it becomes almost impossible to move. But as long as that condition meter is above 0, there's still a chance. But boy, having hope just makes it hurt even worse when you die, and of all the ways to die, exposure will probably get you the most. See, you can store food, water, and medication. You can have access to a sleeping bag or bed. One thing you can't control is the weather.
Well, I suppose there's a possibility that you can, but I'm not prepared to talk about that.
Inclement weather comes and goes, but there's no real way to tell what you're in for. One day it'll be beautiful, the next there'll be a blizzard with no visibility. The best way to deal with that is to establish a base. Find a cabin or outpost that's in close proximity to some amenities and make it your hovel. Everybody who plays this game for long enough will have their favorite spots, nearby a reliable food source or with access to a crafting bench. Generally, a day will consist of making sure you're fed and hydrated, then heading out to do what needs to be done. Some days you'll need to chop firewood, others you might need to do some ice fishing. A little prioritization goes a long way. Eventually though, you'll need to make a pilgrimage for something substantial. A forge, for example, is the only device that can craft arrowheads. There aren't many in the game, so you'll have to pack your bedroll, bring along the necessities, and make a multi-day trip to your destination. It's during these times that I found The Long Dark fitting my ideal survival experience. All that stockpiled food and medication isn't available. You've got what you can carry and what you can find. Sometimes you'll catch yourself in the middle of a blizzard or fog so thick you can't actually figure out where you are. It might be too windy to make a fire, so you've just got to wrap yourself in a sleeping bag and hope you wake up the next morning. Clothing plays a big part in staving off the cold. You've got to balance keen fashion sense with practicality. In reality, you've got 9 types of clothing to worry about: head, hands, inner and outer torso, inner and outer legs, socks, footwear, and accessories. Everything except for hands and footwear can be doubled up, which is a nice touch. A lot of these survival type games only let you wear one jacket or one hat, but in reality, layering up is the key to staying warm in real life. It's not just about having a higher temperature rating than the outdoors though. How protective clothes might be against wildlife and how much mobility they offer are both important to take into account as well. In the beginning, you'll just take whatever you can get. You'll wear leather shoes and a baseball cap just because it makes you a percentile warmer than you would be otherwise. Eventually, you can start getting choosy about the clothes you wear, and it's important to make the right choice. Clothing is one of the heaviest items in the game, so you can't just schlep around 6 contingency jackets. Like most things in The Long Dark, clothing degrades over time, especially if you're attacked by a wild animal. It's a good idea to have plenty of sewing kits and cloth available at your home base so you can patch up your gear. However, if you've got clothing made of animal hides, you'll need its respective hide in order to repair it. Even something as badass as a jacket made from the skin of a bear comes with a caveat. That's just how this game is. Clothing can also become wet over time, which makes it almost impossible to stay warm, so you might have to place your clothes in front of a fire to dry them out. Sometimes it'll be too cold to do anything during the day. At this point, there are a lot of things you can do to pass the time. You can spend the day stitching up your clothes, cleaning your guns, breaking down furniture for wood, and catching up on your reading, for example. You find a lot of books that help improve various skills. See, in the Long Dark, you'll pretty much be useless at everything when you start. Makes sense. You ever try starting a fire? Shit's hard. I assume skinning a bear isn't that easy either, but I don't have enough experience to say one way or the other. Just like real life, you learn by doing. Fail to make 100 fires, eventually you'll learn something about fire making. You won't be good at it, but you'll suck marginally less. So you can get lucky and find a book about cooking or hunting, which speeds the learning process along. But books require a time investment, often a good way to spend a snow day. Some of these books take 15 in-game hours to read, so you'll usually have something to work at. It's the same with sewing clothes. You'll often need to spend days and days working on the same pair of pants, but by God, it'll be worth it. I like that things such as crafting or reading aren't instantaneous. Time has a value just like any other resource, and you'll need to trade some of it to get anything done. At its core, The Long Dark is a game of sacrifice. We're operating by the principle of equivalent exchange here. You get nothing without putting something in. Clean drinking water requires time to boil or purification tablets. Maybe you're in a situation where you have neither, and the best option is just to drink the dirty water and deal with the consequences. Suffering a sprained ankle in a blizzard slows you down a lot, but without any resources, you might be forced to rip your scarf into a cloth and craft a bandage. You get nothing without putting something in. The only control you have is choosing which sacrifice you want to make, and if you don't pick fast enough, the game will choose for you. For me, that kind of resource management evokes the very best of the survival horror genre. It's not enough to collect and hoard, you're constantly forced to calculate the risks and make optimal decisions in every situation. Even something as simple as cooking or walking into the forest to find firewood comes loaded with a number of variables, and it's your responsibility as a player to account for them. It can be stressful, but for the most part, it puts you in a perpetual state of forward thinking. Unless you're in a bad spot and have to improvise, you never just do things. You always carefully consider your situation before executing. This is what makes The Long Dark so successful as a survival game, in my eyes. At no point do you get to stop surviving. You can't craft a device that stops food from going bad. There are a finite number of gun cleaning kits and sewing supplies, and a wolf is a wolf, whether you're on day 1 or day 500. You don't get to call in a tactical nuke to de-wolf the island, though this may be a feature worth considering for a sequel. Here's the part where I, with no professional training, try to explain abstract concepts. To begin with, the comfy factor. This is pretty easy for me. If you're one of my 90 illustrious subscribers, you probably know how I feel about comfy games. If you're not, well, that's just, we got big problems there. You might be thinking, but Madular, how can such a stressful and cold game be comfy? To that I say, yes. Comfiness and uncomfiness are two sides to the same coin. To that end, The Long Dark's comfiness is defined by contrast. The inside of a cabin with a fire roaring is comfy specifically because everything happening outside of that cabin is the opposite of comfy. If you get a kick out of reading a book or playing a game on a snowy or rainy day, you know what I'm talking about here. There's something inherently easier to appreciate about food, shelter, and simple entertainment when inclement weather is outside your door, reminding you that if it had its way, you'd be its bitch. If you've ever read Lord of the Rings, there's many points where the characters find themselves in dark, hopeless situations, but find joy in conversations and memories around a campfire. Once you experience something as terrifying as being caught in a blizzard, you can only appreciate how awesome a fire is. So that's my hypothesis on what makes this game comfy. It's mainly contrast. Now, I know a lot of big game studios don't like to use the word fun because concepts and emotion have no place in the modern reductive discourse. Maybe once we know the specific neurotransmitters involved in the process of having fun, studios can start using it again. But me, I'm not beholden to any corporate interests, not even Raid Shadow Legends, so I'm gonna say fun all I want.
It is so much fun to smash old technology.
That's my technology.
Double tape that.
Hey, that's my...
Double tape that. Give me a match.
Are you crazy?
Actually, I don't know if I would describe The Long Dark as fun, but it's certainly addicting. Every time you jump back into the game, you're better equipped than you were last time. A big part of that is understanding the geography, knowing where you might need a climbing rope or where a snow shelter might be hidden. Stuff like that makes all the difference in the first hour or so of survival mode. It's also understanding all the layers to the game's systems, how they interact with each other, and what needs to be prioritized. I'm never sufficiently bummed out that I don't immediately want to start again. Because there's no endgame game in The Long Dark, it's just one unending journey. If you die, you don't lose a massive fortress full of resources, you lose a cabin full of fish hooks and condensed milk, and you can always get that back. So I wouldn't say the game not being fun is a knock against it. There's a deeper sense of satisfaction at work here. It's kind of like a mature, sophisticated version of fun that smokes cigars and listens to classical music. A major part of the experience is just how atmospheric it is. It is doubtless the best in-a-woods simulator that I've played. A big part of that is the game's presentation. It's not very technically impressive, but it's very aesthetically pleasing. The geometry and meshwork is low poly with highly stylized texture work. It's a good choice for an independent studio because it lets the dev team devote their resources to more important things, but also keeps the game looking very nice. Every frame of this game looks like an intentional composition, thanks to the lighting and colors used. Since snow is either very bright or very dark, depending on the time of day, the sky against it will always create a beautiful contrast. The game certainly looks best during sunrise and twilight. It's not all perfect though. I definitely experienced a lot of visual glitches and some of the distance terrain doesn't look too good under certain conditions. Generally though, the graphics have a simple beauty to them that never wears on the eyes or looks too noisy. The sound design is outstanding. There are so many perfectly captured nature sounds here, and it always sounds appropriate given your surroundings. Walking up this spiraling hill, hearing the creaking of the wooden fences during a storm is awesome. During a calm day, you just get a gentle breeze and the sound of your boots in the snow while all the cookware and tools clatter inside of your backpack. It's perfectly understated to add so much immersion without being too loud, repetitive, or distracting. I don't know how they pulled that off, since I certainly couldn't. I don't know if it's intentional or not, but I particularly like how your character's stomach growling kinda sounds like a wolf. That one caught me off guard more than once. The game also has an ambient soundtrack that's worth mentioning, even though it doesn't play all the time. It's good. I like it. I don't really know how to talk about ambient music. It stays out of the way, gives the sound effects room to do their thing, enhances the mood when necessary. It ranges from determined and hopeful to lonely and sad, which about sums up the whole experience. Now, there's a separate soundtrack for story mode, which I'll mention now as well. It's string quartet music, and okay, I'm just gonna say it, I'm not a huge fan of string quartets. I know, they just make me feel like a 10-year-old chimney sweep on my way home to be beaten by my father, who speaks with a Cockney accent in this vision. I find the strings a little grating, and they command the attention too much for this type of game for my tastes, but I can't complain too much since you can just turn the music down. There's also an all-around nice attention to detail that enhances the atmosphere. When you're cold, you'll shiver uncontrollably while aiming a rifle. If you light a fire indoors, the chimney outside will be billowing with smoke depending on how strong the fire is. If you reload your Lee with 5 or more rounds, you'll use a charger clip for the initial 5 and then individually load the difference. Might not mean much to some people, but I appreciate the commitment to accuracy. The simple act of walking through the wilderness here can be a therapeutic experience. It's immersive enough to draw you entirely into the game. I recommend turning the lights off and using a nice pair of headphones or a good sound system. You'll be totally absorbed. So to conclude my look at the survival mode, it's probably the best of these types of games that I've ever played. Your mileage may vary. If you're looking for a crafting intensive experience with a lot of complexity, a world full of zombies or adversaries to conquer, and a strong feeling of character progression, this probably won't be your game. The Long Dark is a simple, understated survival experience. What you see is what you get, but trust me when I say you won't know what you're seeing until you've played the game for hours and hours. Its depth unfolds slowly, and it demands patience from the player, but when you become comfortable with the interface and know the lay of the land, you'll really appreciate what it has to offer compared to other survival games. Now on to the story mode. As mentioned, only 4 of 5 episodes of the story mode have come out. As of this review, there hasn't been a release date or any word really on when the final episode is dropping. First of all, I want to point out how impressive it is that Hinterland has committed to finishing this story mode, especially considering the percentage of people who actually play it. The general thrust of story mode is the same as survival mode with a few key differences. First of all, there's less scrounging. If a hatchet or pry bar is required to progress, you'll find one. You're also limited in what you can craft, and there's no skill system here either. Unlike survival mode, which offers an open world sandbox broken into several different zones, story mode constrains you to one zone at a time, letting you leave when it's necessary. With those differences in mind, here's your official spoiler warning. Spoiler warning. Okay, let's jump in. In episode 1, you play as Will Mackenzie, a bush pilot who works up north. He's approached by his ex-wife, Astrid, who asks him to take her and a mysterious attaché case up north during a blizzard. Will agrees, and the rest is history. Something about pilots named Mac getting caught up in blizzards under mysterious circumstances. It's worth mentioning that both Mackenzie and Astrid are voiced by Commander Shepard. That's right, Mark Meer and Jennifer Hale.
I've had enough of your snide insinuations.
This whole game has a pretty stacked voice cast actually. We've also got David Hayter.
Kept you waiting, huh?
And Elias Toufexis.
The IS-350 rear-wheel drive model features an exclusive 8-speed automatic transmission that holds a lower gear through corners.
That Canadian government cheddar goes a long way. So after the plane goes down, Mackenzie takes a nap. Despite finding this set of skewed priorities relatable, I'm pretty sure you aren't supposed to sleep after a concussion. Also, this cave is full of goblin skulls. Never a good sign. Astrid was thrown from your plane, and now you've got to find her. You hobble towards the town of Milton, learning the basics of survival along the way before meeting the Grey Mother. She's a strange character. Keeps referring to some kind of terrible calamity involving bad people. I'd never heard of Gwyneth Walsh prior to playing this game, but her voice work is fantastic here.
Doesn't sound like anyone from Milton. Most of the elderly have gone. Or died.
In fact, I consistently found the non-celebrity voice actors actually delivered better performances than the big names. Maybe it's because when I hear Elias Toufexis talk, I am physically incapable of not just hearing Adam Jensen. So the objective here is to collect 8,000 calories worth of food for the Grey Mother's refrigerator, as well as enough wood to burn for 12 hours. It's a good way to kick things off, giving you an open-ended objective and letting you figure things out for yourself. You're given no direction, just go find this stuff. Milton works especially well for this because you're surrounded by food and shelter, and Grey Mother's toilet has all the water you can drink. It's a nice place to learn the ropes. I'd have to say the harshest lesson I learned here is this: pay attention. It can be easy to miss valuable tools or resources. I had to get into this bank vault, which meant I needed a code. I assumed the code was in this jammed locker, which requires a pry bar to open. So I retraced my steps to a house where I'd already been, and sure enough, there was a pry bar. I learned my lesson, so I opened the locker and there was boots, but no code. So I racked my brain. I were a vault code, where would I be? That's right, the old bank manager's house on Guerrero Street. Except I've already been there. Ah well, it doesn't hurt to check again. Oh, here's the code in his bedside table. I learned my lesson, only I can't open this thing for the life of me. The combination doesn't seem to work. What's going on? Oh, that's not a vault, that's the safe. I learned my lesson. At some point, you find a prison escapee who knows where Astrid went. Once again, I'm sold by the voice work. This guy is a total psychopath. He and his prisoner buddies locked the entire town of Milton into a church and burned it down. He's been stabbed, and you can choose to remove the knife or leave it in. I remove it since, honestly, this guy is dead anyway. I'm not really sure to what degree this moral choice affects anything, if at all. I got one remark on it later on, but it kinda set a precedent of moral choices which is never followed up on. I can only assume this was included because when this episode was in development, Telltale Games were in full swing. The episodic structure and the nature of the conversation definitely feels inspired by their work as well. There's also this old guy who calls himself Methuselah who periodically shows up to say cryptic things and then disappears. His fire burns for an infinite amount of time, so I'm assuming he's a wizard. He's got some stuff to say on the overarching plot of The Long Dark, the nature of the storms that took out our plane, what's happening to the world, the cyclical nature of history, what have you. It's a nice break from the elements when he shows up. I like hearing his broad, conceptual take on the world, which contrasts Mackenzie's kind of straightforward and logical take. It makes me feel like something much greater is going on, and I'm not allowed to know what it is yet. So after finishing your chores for Grey Mother, you're given a climbing rope, which introduces us to the concept of vertical traversal, and it lets you escape Milton. Honestly, climbing is a huge pain in the ass. You have limited grip strength, and it drains your fatigue massively, but it lets you access some really helpful areas of the map. So naturally, I inject myself full of liquid Adderall and climb up the rope before coming down so hard I almost pass out in the snow. I just barely make it through this cave and encounter an old man being attacked by a bear, just in time to scoop up his rifle and save him. Thus begins episode 2. This is Jeremiah. He's voiced by David Hayter.
Shit. He got me good this time.
Jeremiah and the bear are at war with each other. With Jeremiah out of commission, we've got a laundry list of things to do here. The first is finding medical supplies for him in the old hydroelectric dam. I don't know the degree to which the weather and stuff in story mode is scripted, but there was a really solid introduction to blizzards and the whole venturing out of your comfy zone to accomplish something I was mentioning earlier. These story sections also help you out for survival mode. The layout changes a bit, but it's nice to know where these shelters are. Places like the dam are so chock full of supplies they're invaluable when you're in a tight spot. For me, it's the camp office. Maximum comfy, other than that frozen corpse in the living room, but hey, in this market, I'll take what I can get. Making the trek to the dam and back is helped by the fact that you have a fully functioning map in story mode. In survival mode, you can use charcoal to get a layout of your immediate surroundings, but I think it would only really be helpful if you managed to survive for months in game. When you return to Jeremiah, he explains that you need to go forge a spear in order to slay the demon bear. Okay, a little unrealistic, but I guess a break from the monotony is good. In all seriousness, he tells you about the mythos surrounding the bear. The story, which is told in a visually striking way, mixes folklore with Canadian history. Apparently, a Hudson's Bay Company trader named Spence had a rivalry with this bear. He forges a spear and goes after the bear only to end up dead and frozen. Now I have to go to Spence's house and fix his spear up. Not really sure why we're assuming that the Spence house is still standing, or why the spear legend is even real. Or if it is real, will the spear just be sitting on the mantle? Or why, if it didn't work for Spence, it'll somehow work for me? But hey, it is what it is. At this point, you might be thinking, this game is just like a series of fetch quests. Yes, a lot of the story is just an excuse for you to go play survival mode, but in a specific way. I'd say the worst of this is that story mode is much easier than survival mode and you can save your game. So on top of doing some pretty menial tasks, that tension of permadeath that characterizes survival mode is just gone. It's not like you can do a self-imposed challenge like not saving either. There are points in the story where you absolutely do need to save. It'd be one thing if the story were really captivating with great characters, but I'm not feeling it yet. Jeremiah is okay, but the novelty is really just hearing Snake. The spear objective is meant to introduce you to the concept of forging, which requires you to light a fire and then get it nice and hot with coal. At this point, you fix the spear and bring it back to Jeremiah. So let's play Who Wants to Be a Millionaire? Which in Canadian dollars is more like Who Wants to Have $1,000? What will the next mission be? A. Collecting 3 whirligigs for Jeremiah. B. Repeatedly dealing with barely functional spear mechanics to fight the bear. C. Suffering through a terrible linear stealth section. Or D. All of the above. It's D. You know it's D. So as we're collecting parts for Jeremiah's radio, we're assaulted by the bear. You don't really get a primer on how the spear works before being mauled, so things don't go well for me the first time, or the second, or several others. But now I have the hang of it, so it should be easy. Oh, you can't use the spear with a sprained wrist. Guess we'll do things the old-fashioned way. Okay, let's do a mad dash now! Oh man. This is stupid. I hate the spear. You have to plant it in the ground in the direction that the bear is coming from. Except for some reason, after 2 seconds, your character stops planting it. So you have to time it. Sometimes the bear stops and roars, and sometimes it just charges. Whatever. I'm glad you can save. So the bear ends up knocking you unconscious and dragging you to its cave. What follows is easily the second worst part of this game. I don't think this really passes for stealth, but I think Hinterland was hoping that it would. See, if you do the exact right thing, then this whole section has the appearance of stealth. But if you step out of line and do something the game doesn't expect, the bear just wigs out and it looks ridiculous. The whole thing feels unfinished. My character continues to speak after he's killed by the bear.
I need to bandage up this wound.
The animation blending on the bear is non-existent. It doesn't know what to do if you're even slightly crouched under an object. This whole linear cave section feels like it was retrofitted over top of an existing simulation framework, and as a result it's frustrating, broken, and most offensively of all, It's very boring. I think they wanted to add some variety to the story mode so it could justify itself in contrast to survival, but this needed way more time in the oven, and that's why it's my official second worst part of the game.
Such a majestic creature. I didn't want to kill you.
Yes, I did. So, you bring the radio parts back to Jeremiah. At this point, you're introduced to the Aurora. When the northern lights are in the sky, electronics start flickering on and off and wolves turn into Final Fantasy enemies. The lights themselves look gorgeous. It's probably the nicest Aurora Borealis effect I've ever seen in a game. And as someone who actually has the pleasure of seeing northern lights in winter, I consider myself a true connoisseur. On top of that, it's a surreal experience to see lights and computers turning on after immersing yourself in this natural environment for so long. It changes the tone and atmosphere of the entire game, if only for a short while. Gameplay-wise, it doesn't change too much. You can find emails on computers for some flavor text, flashlights start working, and predators become more aggressive. In the story, the dam elevator starts working and we can move forward. This section sucks. There are live wires everywhere and stepping on them gives you burns. Okay, that's fair, but until you turn them off, there's an invisible wall that prevents you from moving over them. I absolutely could have made this, maybe with a burn or two, but the game physically prevents you from going forward. This is another example of janky mechanics being used to make these linear story sections work. At the end of the dam, we're knocked unconscious by a character voiced by Elias Toufexis. So episode 2 ends and episode 3 begins with us in control of Astrid. This story is told from her perspective now. You wake up having been rescued by a woman named Molly. I got kind of excited here. She gives off creepy vibes and she locks you into the house. You explore while she's out. I thought maybe we'd be getting a video game adaptation of Misery, and she looks like a cannibal that I know. But no, she's just a lonely woman who hunts down men for sport. And as a staunch feminist, I'm all for it. Please don't put me in your basement, Molly. After getting your bearings, you wander over to town and meet Father Thomas. I really like this character. His voice work, once again, is fantastic. He's got a warmth about him, but his mind is obviously preoccupied with the needs of all the sick people he's taking care of, one of whom is diabetic. That means it's up to Astrid, who's a doctor, to go find his insulin at the site of a plane crash. This episode introduces you to the concept of timberwolves, and once again, I don't know how many of these encounters are scripted, but they're a constant threat throughout. You find the insulin at the crash and meet a passenger named Gwen who's not capable of moving herself. Close your eyes for a second. Try to imagine the least fun thing that you can think of. Okay, do you have it? Carrying Gwen on your shoulder and walking through the night at a snail's pace is less fun than even that. There are points where you're accosted by timberwolves, and I thought the idea had some potential as an additional layer of stress, but it never really works out that way. Rescuing survivors mostly involves walking very slowly. Now, Father Thomas asked us to look for ID or survivors with this rationale.
People need hope to survive.
He was lost in the crash. I couldn't find them. He died in the crash. He's no longer with us. She didn't survive. He didn't make it.
False. No way. Not this time. We created it. Not this time. No, not this time. It's totally made up.
Nice job, Father. Any other bright ideas? The dynamic between Father Thomas and Astrid is nice. He's obviously very religious and brings up God and faith often. Astrid isn't a believer, so it makes her uncomfortable, but she maintains respect for Thomas while voicing her opinion. Thomas and Astrid are just two human beings having a conversation. The next objective is just like your initial visit to Milton. You have to find supplies for the survivors. Only this time it is a ton of stuff, a tome of things to find. I audibly sighed when I saw this come up on my screen, especially the Return Survivors objective. So you walk around finding things, and it takes a very long time. I just like to say here, I don't think fetch quests are inherently bad. They're just a tool, like anything. They can be used well and they can be used poorly. I like Father Thomas, but I'm struggling to care very much about anything else happening here. The game still hasn't told me anything about the Itachi case. Molly phones you every 2 minutes like a psychotic weirdo, but it never really amounts to anything. And I don't care about the stakes as far as the survivors go, because they're largely just nameless, faceless deposit boxes for resources I'd rather be keeping myself. A slow-paced story is fine, but paired with the slow-paced gameplay, it's making for a slog. Survival mode gives you freedom, agency, and tension. You don't need a story to incentivize you because everything you do is a chapter in your own story. Here you're following someone else's instructions, and the reward is further instructions. Not much motivation. I'm beginning to see why the completion rate for this game is so low. So after tucking the survivors in and kissing them on the cheek, we at last wrap this chapter up. You head to the radio tower, and during the Aurora, Astrid manages to make contact with Mackenzie, which is where these two episodes coalesce. It doesn't last long though, so Astrid needs to leave this area, which means going through an abandoned mineshaft and solving fuse box puzzles. Typing the script is exhausting me as I'm forced to recount this miserable experience. Yeah, I don't know what to say. You wander around these mines, everything looks the same, you find fuses that work, you put them in fuse boxes. Inevitably you get lost, and you just keep turning right until you find your way back to familiar territory. My explanation is short, but rest assured, this felt like a lifetime. So Astrid escapes the mine, finds herself on the coast, and episode 3 ends. The next episode begins with us resuming control of Mackenzie. That guy we met last time is named Mathis. Now don't get me wrong, I think Elias Toufexis has an awesome voice. The man was made for this job. But it feels like he doesn't have much direction here. He just kinda talks like himself.
Turns out you have a damn hard head, pilot.
Mathis is supposed to be this intimidating, evil son of a bitch, but I don't feel totally sold on that. However, I'd like to mention here that the facial animations during these in-game cutscenes are absolutely great. They're handmade, very expressive, and work in tandem with the voice acting to give these characters a lot of, well, character, even when the script doesn't pull its weight. So we're locked into Blackrock Prison, which is one of the toughest and most dangerous areas to navigate in the survival mode. The warden, Franklin, is locked in a cell next to yours. He explains a little backstory for the area. Turns out that Mathis was imprisoned for murder. He and his fellow prisoners are trying to break his son, Donner, out of solitary confinement. Franklin seems genuinely shook by Donner, so at this point I'm hoping for a really great villain to knock it out of the park and raise the stakes. Mathis beat Franklin within an inch of his life, so now we're being sent out to get medical supplies, which is probably the weakest justification for a fetch quest yet, but whatever. I'm just glad that cutscene is over. It takes like half an hour to get control over your character. I like the layout of the prison. Your progress is gated at certain points, so you can only follow predetermined paths. Wolves are occupying sections of the yard, and you've been stripped of all your equipment, so you've got to play it smart until you find some supplies. It's really convenient that there are so many rotary dial phones in perfect working condition around the island, because Mackenzie is contacted as he coincidentally walks past one of them. I have to say, this is such a silly way of having characters communicate with each other. It makes me feel like they just weren't confident in having traditional NPCs walking around or interacting with the player. Control is always arrested from you the minute a character talks to you, and when there are live NPCs, they're static. They just sit there and wait for you to talk. The only people who are implied to be actively moving around and doing things just call you on the phone. Anyway, the woman on the phone is named Jace. She's in some kind of war with Mathis. Not much to say about this mission. You walk through the cold, find the medical supplies, and come back. At this point, the game warns you to hide any items that may interest the guards so they're not confiscated. I think, oh, okay, I'll put my gun in this storage box so I can get it back later. Mathis tells Mackenzie that he's got to head to the power plant and reactivate the electricity in order to restore power to the solitary wing and release the lock. I head back outside and they took everything, even my clothing. I don't understand. If you're sending me on an incredibly dangerous mission to do something very important, why wouldn't you increase my odds of survival? Taking my gun I can kind of understand, but my scarf? My beans? So I go ahead and reload my save because that's bullshit. Then I head off to the power plant. You get more conveniently timed phone calls from Jace throughout this episode. Thus far, she's just another in a growing list of characters who don't seem to have much relevance to the overarching story, or a personality. Once inside the power plant, we get to wander down more dark hallways while doing a repetitive puzzle involving steam pipes, valves, and pressure meters. My favorite kind of puzzle. There are so many boring, linear indoor segments in this game, it almost feels malicious, like the developers are angry at me they have to keep working on this story until 2038. So instead of working on restoring the power, we smash up the machine in charge of the locks to solitary. To the game's credit, the power plant exit leads through the prison boiler room, which means you don't need to make the long trek back. This I appreciate. What I don't appreciate is that we are immediately sent out on another fetch quest to find 3 detonators. Now, Mathis is going to use dynamite to blow solitary open. I struggle to imagine a less tantalizing motivation than finding detonators. The missions in this game are weak. First of all, all, there are no rewards. I'm not talking about special items or anything like that, although that would be nice too, but story-wise, we're advancing at a snail's pace. Each episode introduces a new set of characters with their own problems going on, but they largely fall flat, even if they are likable. I got a chip on my shoulder over the endless chore lists they give me too. Anyway, it's time for another mine section. Not just a mine, but a mine where you need to solve puzzles with elevator cranks. Also, there's poison gas everywhere, and you can suffocate and die. Why? Why are they doing this? I refuse to believe anyone plays through these sections and says, this is a valuable use of 30 minutes. This enhances the story mode. This was worth waiting 8 years for. The player will enjoy this. I feel like I'm playing Resident Evil 7, but without any enemies, and I'm moving at an eighth of the speed. So you find the detonators, but when Mathis tries to use them, they blow the dynamite early. Turns out Jace is one of those tech geeks that can inexplicably make cool things happen.
I hacked faster than I've ever hacked before. When word of the asteroid got out, people were racing to get supplies. Everyone wanted souvenirs so they could remember the Earth. And people were sad.
The prison is on fire, so it's total chaos. You need to follow a path and make it outside where there are searchlights. Remember when I said the bear cave was the second worst part of the game? Well, if you stuck around to find out the worst, I'm happy to say we've made it. These searchlights are the worst part of the game. It's not repetitive like the caves or mines, it's not a slog like dragging the survivors back to camp, and it doesn't even take that long. But it's unfinished. They just shoved an unpolished, unfinished garbage fire of a section into this game, and once again, tried to pass it off as stealth. First of all, when you're spotted, it just triggers a generic fail state. There's no special animation, no cutscene, a generic gunshot sound effect plays, the screen blurs, and a text box tells you you've been shot. Yeah, no need to visually communicate any of that. Just trust us, you've been shot. Now, when there's a spotlight level in a game, you'd expect it to be done with raycasting. Raycasting is when a line is drawn from an origin point to a particular direction, in this case, from a spotlight to the player. If the ray makes contact with an object before meeting the player, the raycast fails. The spotlight doesn't see the player. If the ray contacts the player, that means there are no objects in the way, and the spotlight sees the player. The spotlight area here doesn't use raycasting. As far as I can tell, it makes the circle of the spotlight a large game over area. I hid behind multiple objects and was somehow seen every time. To say this is amateurish is an understatement. The Long Dark runs on the Unity engine, which gives even inexperienced programmers all the tools necessary to make a functional spotlight section with cover and obstacles. You yourself can probably do this right now after following a 5-minute tutorial on YouTube. I don't think this is lazy necessarily, it just feels unfinished. It's like they expect the player will do the thing they're supposed to do without screwing up. For the most part, I'm sure that's exactly what happened, but me, I like to tempt fate. It's classic bad game design to leave sections unfinished under the developer's assumption that nobody will fail. So sometimes I like to fail just to see what'll happen, and this part was just goofy. Play through like normal and you may not notice, but try to break it and it'll break fast. When I died, I tried to reload my save and the game wouldn't let me. After messing around here for a while, my game just crashed. This feels like a prototype gone wrong. Not very good at all. So after this, you'll head back to the power plant. Mathis confronts us with a hatchet of all things, and Mackenzie just punches him multiple times. Yeah, what did you think would happen? Bring a gun next time. Mackenzie and Jace fall into the river. When they wash up, Jace is in very bad shape. The game is trying to play this like an emotional climax, and they remark on what a relentless villain Mathis is, but I don't really know why. I just met Jace in person like 30 seconds ago. I know nothing about her personality. It's the same with Mathis. Is he relentless? I don't know. Why would I assume that he's gonna pursue me? So far, the most ruthless thing he's done is follow me 12 feet through the boiler room and fumble towards me with a hand axe. The game is missing hours of the character building necessary to make this the epic build-up it's attempting here. The very last scene of the episode has Astrid wash up on shore, half frozen to death as a group of people, quarantined on an island, recognize her. They ask her where the attaché case is. Apparently there's some kind of cure in it, but the episode ends here. Good a place as any, I guess. I'm not exactly chomping at the bit for more story mode. However, the case and the Aurora are about the most interesting things for me, so who knows? Maybe episode 5 will redeem the entire thing. Maybe? So, the way I see it, there are two categories of people who may be interested in this story mode. The first is people who are just interested in this kind of episodic story in a survival setting and don't really care about the gameplay one way or the other. If that's how you feel, I can't really see you getting much out of this game. I'm not the biggest fan of Telltale, but their episodic structure works even even when the gameplay isn't great. It's because there's a lot of meaningful world building. A special focus is paid to the characters. Even when you're doing busy work, you're learning more about the supporting cast. You come to care about them, and they alone drive the story forward. Personally, I didn't feel any of that in The Long Dark. I can't even describe Mackenzie's personality that well, and I played as him. He's sarcastic, willing to do things when people ask him to. The story is set up well. I wanted to learn more about Mackenzie and Astrid's relationship. What's in the box? Methuselah. There are two things that would have gone a long way here. The first, more choices like the prisoner with the knife in him. Making difficult, morally ambiguous decisions in a desperate survival situation is a writer's dream. There's endless opportunity for shocking consequences, plot twists, and cliffhangers to hook the player. The second would be human enemies. Contending with nature takes a backseat in story mode, so I think it would have added a lot of variety if you could come across escaped Blackrock prisoners, armed and desperate for food. Even having flashlight-wielding enemies in these mine sections would have added a welcome layer of tension. Human enemies would have made the story mode a worthwhile investment for enjoyers of the survival mode, because as of now, it seems like most fans aren't all that interested. My guess is that such a feature was considered but never followed through. It would take a fair amount of development resources to have this simulation include human enemies, but all the phone calls, janky spotlights, static NPCs, they just make the story feel unfinished, like these features are being stitched on top of a game that wasn't ever meant to support them. The other type of person would be somebody who's interested in survival games but is put off by high-stress gameplay that's inherent to the genre. If you're in that group, you might find something of value here. The first couple of episodes are a good way to lower yourself into the game's systems without feeling intimidated. You're always given the right tools for the job, and you're never lacking for resources, but the pressure is on just a little bit. Regardless of how I feel, the developers felt the story mode was a part of their vision, so I gotta respect them for seeing it through. Well, still waiting for episode 5, but I'm assuming it's coming. Make no mistake, this game is absolutely worthwhile for the survival mode alone. Nothing in the story mode is bad enough to devalue that experience. That said, The Long Dark is worth your time even if the story mode isn't. There's a lot to dig into here if you're a fan of immersive survival games. It's realistic, but never past the teetering point where things become uninteresting or too punishing. You're given the tools, you learn the ropes, you die a few times, but you get better. If this sounds appealing to you, I recommend you check it out. Hey, thanks for watching this review. That was a long one. A lot of work and a lot of love goes into these videos, so if you're so inclined, please like and subscribe. You may enjoy some of the other reviews on my channel, and I've got a lot more in the works. Feel free to keep up with me on Twitter or Instagram, and have yourself a wonderful day.